Hi, my name is Roy Griffin. My call sign is W4RJG, and I live in South Boston, Virginia. This is going to be a reenactment of the presentation given at the Northeast HamXposition in Marlborough, Massachusetts on September 26, 2023. EDM was invited to speak, and I was all set to go, but there was a glitch with getting my equipment into the room ahead of time to set up recording equipment, and I didn't. So I'm going to reenact basically how the presentation went. There was not a lot of questions going on during the class, so I don't have to reenact that, which is probably pretty good. And we'll just take it from there. But any hiccups, any little bumps, things I might not do right, they're going to stay here because live presentation is never 100% perfect. So here we go. I'm thanking all of you for being here on the video, as well as I did to everybody who's there in the room. The room was pretty full, more than I expected, which made it much more exciting to give the presentation. The presentation, of course, is unique for what EDM is about, and it was the first time we did it outside of the EDM world itself. Normally, everything I've ever done for videos or anything else that our group has done has always been within the EDM community only. And there are some groups that were there in front of me, and some of you who are listening that may have a P2P component of your emergency communication plan, but what we have is unique, that it is a comprehensive view of how to plan for P2P's use in your support. Well, you don't have to hold your questions to the end because I can't hear you. So I gave a quick background, as you can read, about I've been around doing this for quite a while. I've been doing emergency communication support in a number of different areas, and I'm currently doing a few different things at the same time, which is fun. Introducing what EDM is. We were formerly part of ETO WinLink Thursday P2P section. Not P2P, P2P. See, I told you, it's live. Not everything's going to be perfect. And the P2P portion was not part of their regular exercises, and we felt we should be doing more. So a lot of us decided to start doing our own organization, while we're still doing ETO work, by the way. We have nothing against what they're doing. We like what they do. But we became our own unique organization on January 1st of this year, 2023. And we started with about 70 operators, and we're over 150 operators now. We're still growing. Now, we do have a unique training mission as part of our vision, and that is truly when all else fails. All leaving RF-only communications, and it's more than just RF only, because it's independent operation from any internet, cellular, satellite, repeaters, commercial power grids, DMR, D-Star, Fusion. You don't have the internet to interconnect with repeaters. Repeaters would only work if they had backup power, and only for a limited period of time, depending upon the situation. So you can't even really count on repeaters. So when we say RF, we mean P2P or RF. Now, the aim is to help emergency communication teams build their own self-sustaining communications channels for where they live, how they operate with their served agencies. There are a couple of terms you'll be hearing over and over. One of them is local served agencies, and served agencies, I'll explain at this point, is it could be government agencies, your county, city emergency managers. It could also be a non-government agency, Salvation Army, Red Cross being the two most prominent and well-known across the country. Now, how do we go about achieving the goal? It's a utilization of amateur radio with VAR-AC, and I'll stop here and say VAR-AC can be pronounced three ways. There's VAR-AC, what I'm saying. There is VARIC, kind of Eastern European with a k at the end, or VARA-AC, but there's no double A, so don't do that. You can do whatever way you want, as long as we all know what we're talking about. And of course, which is only peer-to-peer, which is why we're utilizing it. And with WinLink peer-to-peer mode as well. And we'll mostly right now doing HF, but we do want to incorporate VHF as well. And we want you to incorporate VHF as well. Leveraging amateur radio's unique capability for when all else fails messaging. We do have unique capabilities, one of them being we're volunteers. You don't have to worry about a payroll. And we come in with our own equipment, pretty much, unless you got a great EOC relationship going and equipment sitting there for you. And we want the development of a system providing the capabilities for our team members so that they can do this where they live. Now, we do have target station teams They are all, each member is a licensed amateur radio operator across the United States, territories, and Canada. Pretty much general and above, given the limitations of technicians. They're assigned to specific frequencies, what we call channels, on the HF bands within each team, and every member is only on one team. And we utilize VAR-AC HF beaconing and broadcasting techniques in disaster training events. Two very unique qualifications that nobody else has in any other piece of software. That is also intermixed with the entire operation of VAR-AC for complete communications capability. Kind of like dialing, see if somebody's there, going out to the street corner, saying, hey, who's here? As well as direct one-to-one communication. And it's with the teams, it's helping us with simulating the total loss of communication capability. So here is a map of our operators as it stood a while ago. There are currently 4 teams on this display. We have at least 6 now. And you get an idea that we pretty much cover the United States. There are some areas that we would like to get a few more because they are more heavily populated based on the number of EDM operators that are there. But if they can get that into their local area, we don't want them to become EDM as much as we want P2P direct messaging in emergency situations to become part of their lifeblood. Now, member requirements, we do have some. First, you have to maintain a ready-to-activate HF target station at your primary location. And by primary, it means wherever you would pretty much go when you're going to be wanting to do this kind of operation with a major disaster at hand. Now, that could be at your home, pretty much most of us, but there are some, they don't really have the capability at home, but they've got a great relationship with their EOC, and so they'll go down to the Emergency Operations Center run by the government, but they have direct access. They can go down there, they have immediate access, and they can be up and running. Some might even be mostly their car only. Same situation, they can't do it at home. They don't have the friendly EOC, but their car is fully equipped, and some can even put up a pretty good HF station right there. We also want them to participate in ongoing, our comprehensive training. It's not just, oh, we want you to do something. It's always a completeness to it for what we're trying to do within each exercise. And there are EDM established processes and procedures that get accomplished. And we want them to learn from the videos and the participation in related periodic exercises, not just to have knowledge. Because there are 3 things that you could have as far as being involved in something like MCOM. You could have knowledge, ooh, I know everything that's on the paper, or I remember everything the video said. There's understanding, no, you get an idea of how it all works, but there's actual comprehension. And there's actual accountability for what's really there, and you know how to make it really work. We want everybody at all 3 levels. Especially at the 3rd level then, is what we're gaining more and more with our operators, so they can not just be knowledgeable, not just understand how it works, but they can be in there making it work. And remember, they're all doing it individually, because in an all else fails, initially, you're not working with anybody else, you're doing it by yourself. Now, with the training, we make it a core activity. This is not just something we kind of do. We continue to build up our capabilities as a team as it's done with training ahead of each event. The training is done by the execution of what was covered. What was covered is, it's focusing on a specific topic. Earlier this year, broadcast and beaconing in VAR-AC. Sometimes it's a complete review of all that's been done before and a more thorough exercise. We may have kind of a focus in it, but you got to do kind of everything that's been done. And we're always looking for new things to do, ways to get other information done. Over a month ago, we did an HF listening exercise, so especially for the operators that kind of new to HF without having access to the neat little tools to say, ooh, where are the active bands, how to know how to do it the way experienced HF operators know how to do it. We have a really good video on that, by the way. EDM, we have teams, and we currently have 6, maybe even 7 by the time this gets published, and they are used to help us coordinate our exercises. Now, we usually will have one team, about 30 operators, and they will be the target stations. And P2P, target is who is being called, specifically that one station. And then everybody else is a field station trying to get to that one station. And we have them spread out across the HF bands, so everybody gets to play around differently. And everybody gets a chance to be involved, though, because either you're a target or you're a field, but you're a station, part of the plan. Now, not every exercise that we do is just like that. We can't even have one where everybody's target, everybody's a field. That's what happens when you initially start the whole call-up process, what we call a call-up process, of who's there. So we simulate different ways of how to learn and practice what we are showing them. In a P2P mode, an operator must know who to call and where. Now, for those who are not specifically aware of what P2P is, it's called peer-to-peer. We'll be producing a training video in a week or two about what that is. But for this training and presentation, it's going to be quickly explained that it's one station, A, calling station B, and it's not just that. We do that with digital modes anyway, but it's A calling specifically B, and all the traffic that they have to be passed is for station B only. It's a one-to-one, and it's not a communication mode that's going to be directly interfacing with anybody else. Obviously, when B station gets it, there could be some information that gets passed on, but it's not part of that digital communication of one-to-one. Peer-to-peer, real simple, it's kind of like that. Now, part of our training is for everyone to be involved, as I said, but every member is to take this information by being involved, looking at the training videos that we have, specifically the ones that we'll put out before an exercise if that's warranted, and put it all into action. The training is to develop a member to be comfortable operating in P2P. P2P is unique. Every mode has something quirky about it where it can go bumpy on you in different ways. P2P has its own, and one of them is I'm A, I want to call B, and B's not answering. How come B isn't answering? Because the message that I have targeted for B doesn't say it's going to B. It's actually going to C, somebody else. And so the communication isn't complete. So little quirky things happen. You want to be comfortable so you know how to make it work the right way the first time and quickly come up with a solution if it's not, because things happen. Now, as we move forward, we're always looking to make a more complete mindset of how to make it work for themselves is what we want our members to do for their local environment. And every local environment has its differences from others. Now, implementation as part of the tactic is not what EDM, the group steering committee, the oversight for accomplishing everything. It's what each one of us, and that includes steering committee members, what we can do with this information, what we've learned, and to bring it home. It's working with our groups with our served agency, a direct contact, making communications with plans with them. And they're going to be needed differently depending upon your agency. If you have a government agency working with and you're going to be supplementing their first responder network, that's going to be different than if you're working with a group such as Salvation Army or Red Cross, two more prominent ones people know, and you're going to be working with them, but their needs are not as critically urgent, but they're extremely important and they need to know information. Red Cross, what happens if a shelter is now full? They need to know that right away to no longer direct traffic towards it. We have that capability to give that communication need because what they normally would be able to use is no longer available. Remember, all else is still failing. EDM now has developed a solid base of practices and procedures for each of us to bring home. It's not complete. I did say we're looking to make it more, but there's so much there already. We can bring each one of us home to start putting it in, integrating it into what we do with our served agencies at home. A RAC call-up process is an initial heartbeat of what we talk about. And that's when the disaster hits and everybody starts coming out of their homes, their shelters, whatever. And as ham radio operators, we're looking to find out how can we go out and help. There are lots of different things that can get done, but how do you find each other because the repeater's not there? The cell phone isn't there. Texting capability isn't there. The website that you all might go to check in isn't there. We have a process that allowed that to occur over a local or a very large area, including the entire nation, really. So we want everything to be more useful for your local needs. Now, planning is always going on with EDM. We've already done two different kinds of exercises, the one we're about to do and the one that we just did, for all the other things that we've done before, but that's what we should be doing. Making sure we're covering all the bases and getting everybody comfortable with the various parts of direct messaging in a P2P mode. And everyone can start developing plans for their community. And even for your own groups, this is part of the tactics that's worthwhile to pursue, even if you're not part of EDM. But to do that, we strongly promote two basic items that you must have to beginning to make this thing work. You should have a written, signed off by everyone involved, emergency operations plan. That is so important. Everybody who's going to be involved at whatever level, and you may have multiple EOPs. You may have one with your government agency, the first responder support that you might give, and you'll have a separate one for a non-government agency who doesn't really work with the government, but you work with them, so you may have something different going on with them. And it needs to be understood by both sides. What's the need? They decide that really. And then what the solution is, which is the two of you work on together. And you want to make sure there's a part in that EOP that addresses that when all else fails. Don't make it part of just the regular operation. This is a special operations. Call it black ops, if you will, because it's when everything goes dark, there's no electricity, no communications. Okay. The second basic item that we think is really needed is the ICS 205. And for those who are not familiar with the NIMS ICS method of incident command, overseeing the management of a disaster or major event, ICS 205 is laying out what all those communication availability is in case something happens. It's not how you're actually going to execute it. That's the IC 217, IC 217A. 205 is the planning. This is what you're expected to be using, and you might actually use it during the problem, but what can be used, who's expected to go where, and again, we have that on our HF training video, which you should go watch, and explains it in a little more detail. Now, if you have not considered bringing P2P capability into your local plans, or you haven't really thought about it, you're kind of like, well, you know, maybe something, we highly recommend you do so. And one of the ways you get started is risk management. Now, risk management, you'll see there I have two columns, but actually first there are four columns. Two columns are positive risk management, two columns are negative risk management. Positive risk management, which doesn't get talked about much, that is seeing an opportunity and finding ways to take advantage of it by doing an analysis, see how much you want to get involved. Businesses will do that. New product, new capability for production, ways to expand their business to increase revenue, maybe just to do something that will actually just increase profits by not bringing in new revenue, but making the operation better. But that's a positive risk. You have to make some changes, and you have to look at it carefully. And with that, both sides, but we'll be addressing here negative risk management because we're all about problems. Potential is how likely is the risk to be manifested? Potential. Can it really occur? We've had a number of train derailments. That's something that I would be concerned about in my area. We have trains that go through, which goes right over a river, which goes down into a reservoir, which is drinking water for lots of other people elsewhere. Obviously, we're going to be tracking it as a potential, but the potential for it, given how many trains derail per year, any way you want to look at it, very small. However, the impact, if it does manifest itself, if it does occur, will be big. So, as an example, a common one that has to be thought about. Losing electric capability everywhere for a long period of time over a large area, it has a very low possibility. Potential. But if it does happen, there are many concerns and lots of problems to be ready for. Therefore, the impact can be huge in all sorts of different ways, and it takes time to think it all out. We as amateur radio operators don't have to think about everything, but we need to be ready for it as part of the planning. You have to determine what are your other risks. If you have a raceway, and I now have lived in two places where there's a raceway, one of the concerns would be the fuel tanks leak. So you got horrible diesel type fuel leaking out on the ground and the fumes, or an explosion. Doesn't happen, but it can. Now, when you do this, there's no one right way to do it other than sit down with those involved and make plans. Other than that, the details, there are commonalities, but there are details that can be wildly different. Now, I live in a rural community. The needs here are very different from the crowded suburban area where I lived for decades, or for where I worked for decades in a major city, downtown Manhattan. All very, very unique needs, common in some respects, but each one had to be dealt with very uniquely, separate from the others. Now imagine a large section of a multi-state electrical grid goes down for a few days. That would be a situation you want to develop. I already mentioned the train derailment for me because it's right there, quarter of a mile away from where I live, and the river itself is 3/4 of a mile away. So that's something that I would be very, very concerned about for a number of different reasons. Of course, in all of this, you want to make sure your family's safe. Let's make sure we understand we're not telling people to make this your highest priority. Your highest priority is always your family. Always needs to be put in there for voluntarily supporting through emergency communications as an amateur radio operator. But these are things you want to plan for. Major scale. You determine what's in your area that could happen. And then start talking. And don't forget to make sure WinLink, we mostly have mentioned VAR-AC, but WinLink HF and FM is part of your planning. And FM does not just have to have a repeater. Everything is P2P mode capable. Now to implement this, you want to use the principles and objective tactics. Objective tactics. Not the subjective how we do the exercise, but objective as to what did you see that was of value, and we encourage our members to bring that back for them to do the following for their local needs. Empowering reliable communication. Empowering meaning finding ways to give people the capability to do something that they weren't doing before, and as an amateur radio operator, finding ways to get that radio communication available for them. If you have finding ways to get funds for them, maybe to get an HF radio station up at their EOC and or in their emergency communications trailer so that you can be there and be that line of communication support as you agreed to with them. Same thing with your served agencies, your volunteer organizations, same kind of a thing. Find ways to work with them, get communications embedded into their system. You're empowering them so they don't need to have you with your equipment go there. You can have any one of your team members who are part and trained process operator to just go there and operate the equipment. It gives you more flexibility. That's part of the empowerment. You want to be building a robust independent communications network. So there are a couple of key words there. You're building, in other words, it can take some time. It's just not, ta-da! It's robust, it's full-featured, as much as possible given the location and the amount of money you have available. Independent, because it doesn't require somebody else to do it, but just you and your team members to be able to work the stuff. And a communications network, so it's not just you and then you kind of have something going. You want to have your other points of communication nodes around you that you can work with. That's part of what EDM teaches, is how to find the other stations. And we have a video coming out about that too. Now each member contributes to the maturity of the community's emergency communication. Maturity. We're not saying that the people who are working there are not mature. Not at all. Please do not get that inference. What we're talking about is the maturity of how the whole thing works. And if you want to get an idea of the kind of thing I'm talking about, go listen to First Responder in a intense situation. And you can find it on YouTube. There is shots fired, various police units coming up, or it's a bad fire units come up, and suddenly there's an explosion inside, and more people just got hurt, and you need more equipment down there. Listen to the dispatchers. That's maturity. Handling each piece of information, not subjectively how someone could feel about it, but objectively what needs to get accomplished in the best way possible. So we want everybody to get that as well, and that's part of what we're trying to teach the members in our community. Now, there's a third tactic in all of this, which is not unique to EDM. It's team support. I keep using the word team for a reason. We do have mutual support with one another. Obviously, the steering committee members are a main driving force behind all the communication. But all of our members help each other. We gain the experience on all of our members with the messages in Group I/O. There are some people who are very experienced in emergency communication in ways that steering committee members aren't. Or they're able to, in the Groups I/O through messages, by asking questions, looking for ideas, and somebody who's kind of new. And I'm not too sure how to do this. Somebody may come in, hey, this is how we've done it. Again, learning, helping, and supporting each other. Or technical questions about equipment. P2P has some very unique aspects to it, and some people are new to it. And there are some that are willing to even learn where they haven't even done digital communications before. That's a learning experience. So we're all here helping each other. On top of all that, along with that, I don't know which way the best way to do it, we have some of our members that are paying for Groups.io, so we have the full capability of Groups.io. Total number of members that can be on our Groups.io groups, as well as then getting access to all the other features, calendar, files, database, chat feature. Next slide. New chat feature. And we've instituted it, haven't really used it yet, looking for ways to make use of it, but that's there as well. And all this is part of what is labeled there multi-tiered information flow. It's from the lowest person who says, hey, I have a question, therefore there's a need and we want to meet information needs, capability needs, as well as from the steering committee for the things that we learn and we've done, and to develop the exercises as we gather together, frequently, by the way. And for each exercise, we have after action or lessons learned. One person uses the term hot wash. And we want to go through the messages, review them, see what was there that we can glean from, as well as maybe a little more formal process. We want to do surveys after every exercise. We want to know what do the members think about it, what did they think about it as a team, and we want them to speak back to us about the good, the bad, the ugly. Go ahead and whistle for those who you know the song. And we also plan to have Zoom sessions from time to time. Face-to-face, we get to know each other even better, and that increases our ability to support one another. Why? Why are we doing all this? I just spend, 20, 30 minutes giving lots of facts, lots of information, and that doesn't always say, yes, I want to do it. You see the need, but you're not inspired. People who do sales know, facts tell, stories sell. So I have stories. Obviously, since we're talking about disasters and bad things, well, yeah. First one, top of the list, 9/11. Lots of things about emergency communications with it. My building was 1 block north. I know people who are working down there at ground zero. It still impacts me to this day. But what I'm going to talk about is a 1-second impact that is not generally known. I know about it because my building was 1 block north of the World Trade Center, and we were impacted because of this. The building itself, the skin, each tower, the skin was the strength. It was not an inner core strength like pretty much every other skyscraper is in New York City. The skin is the strength. A few other buildings around the world have done the same thing. So when they fell, they just came straight down. The floors fell inside, and the skin just went down with them. It didn't explode out, really. With that, one of those big slivers of the skin, the outer part of the building, came down. It went across and slid down the side of the Verizon building. Verizon building used to be a 9X, which used to be an AT&T. It's a very old, heavy brick steel building, was not taken down when the North Tower right next to it fell. What did happen was when that piece of the building slid down along the building, the Verizon building, it went and sliced 3 sets of cables, and then I'll tell you the last one in a second. Those 3 sets of cables were every landline going back to AT&T days, every phone hooked up to Verizon through the hundreds of buildings and the hundreds upon hundreds of floors of the thousands upon thousands of desks with the phone on it, all coming in through those cables, gone. No longer connected to the network. All the cell phone towers, they were all around Lower Manhattan, on the top of all the buildings, and there were a lot of them because there were a lot of cell phone use going on inside of the Wall Street area. Downtown Manhattan, not just finance, lots of other businesses, but yeah, a lot. All those cables cut. So all cell phone capability disappeared instantly. The FiOS, the internet network, also came through at the bottom of the building. So that means everybody who could do web-based communication, which could be voice over internet, telephone, as well as looking on websites, what's going on. People who don't want to go out on the street, but looking at the news, what's happening over at the World Trade Center. Those who aren't within a few blocks of it, all gone. Business needs disappeared. As well as these other impacts from that day. New York City at several World Trade Center, that's the building that burnt and went down later on that day. It was the New York City Emergency Operations Center there for the entire city. Fire, police, that was their headquarters. That already was gone pretty much by 12 noon. I don't know exactly what floors they were on, but by that time, the diesel fuel in the basement for their emergency generators was now burning and building was now gone. So for all the communication trailers, they didn't have their centralized viewpoint. And the way they all got to each other was on top of the North Tower. You have a big black and white tower that was there. That was 30 stories tall alone, plus, and I had been on top of the South Tower to view it, lots of other repeater towers up there as well. Lots of communications facilities up there, all disappeared. So on multiple levels, media, government, non-government, important, critical, urgent, gone. New Jersey, across the Hudson River, their state police, the entire northern part of the state, ran their entire repeater system on that tower. So the impact was not just New York City. It was huge. Gone. 1 second for the Verizon building. A few seconds before that for what was up on the North Tower. That's how fast things can happen. But that was a man-made event. Now, if you're wondering, well, really, you know, that's like never going to happen again. I certainly hope not. But south of me, North Carolina, made national news. A bunch of guys was shooting up a major substation for the local power company and took out a major substation. So thousands upon thousands of people without power, like that, as each one of those systems failed, one on top of the other. So things can happen, man-made, and it will have a large impact. Now, natural. Of course things can happen. Let me tell you about one. Also in the area where I grew up, I lived through this. Hurricane Sandy. Wasn't a lot of rain, unlike most hurricanes that was big. However, it had a super low pressure, and low pressure creates wind. It created a lot of flooding downtown Manhattan, salt water for all the cables and equipment like that underwater. They can handle natural rainwater, but the salt water, well, that made more things fail, faster, harder, needing repair. Staten Island, where I grew up, where we used to never have water come beyond the general beach area, this came half a mile inland. Never happened before. So there were multiple effects. And that impacted one main road that ran across about one half of the southern shore of Staten Island. So a major travel area was just gone. But even worse, going into New Jersey, coming west out of Manhattan and south of Manhattan, we had severe winds, 12 hours, sounded like a tornado. That type of thunderous noise, like a locomotive, was rushing outside your house, but it never stopped. It just kept on running. We had a 4-foot oak tree. We were living on a hill like this. Oak tree was here, and it got blown uphill, uprooted. That's how strong the wind was. So, thinking out a little bit more, I meant all the other trees didn't just have branches go down with some lines being impacted. You had major branches that were ripped off the tree. It didn't just take down the line, it took down transformers up on utility poles. So the impact was huge, complicated, and even areas that could get their power going, then the town who was severely impacted would try and get their power off of them, and then the area that did have power, well, they lose it because it was too much for them. That was my town. 10 days we were without power, 10 days. I don't care what repeater, what cell phone tower, what backup power mode that they had, it wasn't going to last more than a few hours. That meant all the first responder repeaters were now without power, and if they had diesel fuel, that could last a period of time, but now let's go into the other long-term impact to understand why you want systems like this. Without the power, the fuel stations couldn't get the fuel out from the tanks underground. They need electricity to run the compressors to get it out. That wasn't happening. It was such a large area, it covered from the Jersey Shore to Midway Point. Okay, well, the other gas stations then that weren't impacted, they could give you fuel. Yes, that meant everybody's now going there. Every home that was doing a home generator needed their gas every single day. So every day, all the gas stations had people lined up with their 1 5-gallon tank because they were rationing the amount of fuel. Or if you could go much further into New Jersey or into Pennsylvania, you might get your 2 tanks filled or 3 tanks, but you had to drive all that distance out. Now you're also spending more gasoline, and so you had to get your car filled. So just think of all the impact now for first responders. Their local use where they would get their diesel to keep their repeater going wasn't quickly available. So they were all trying to develop other means of getting fuel to help them, and that didn't always happen right away. In my county I lived in, they were all interconnected. So even if one person was working, it didn't do them any good because they needed the central hub at the county level to do all the communication needs. So unless that one was working, and it didn't for a while, complications, unbelievable. And without electricity, that means food, supplies, medical needs, none of that was available except at hospitals. And then they had to, of course, more than anybody, get the fuel for their generators, more than the police or for the fire. Really tough. If with our capability, we can become a multi-level communication network, local for neighbors, what news is being heard, where they might be able to get gas at a closer place, as well as supporting the first responder community with their needs, because more things could be happening depending upon what's happening in that neighborhood. And of course, the latest one that we heard is Maui, where it was a raging fire. It was natural, but there were other things that weren't natural. We'll put that aside. That's politics. But fire raged through, took down multiple levels of communications capabilities. And if any ham radio operator was in that area, in the town, they lost their ability. They just had to run for their lives with their family. Families are always, always, always first. In this case, there was no thought. They just had to go. So there were some repeaters around the area that were there, but nobody could call for help or give status or anything inside because the entire town is now black. And nobody had communication capabilities. There were 19 out of 22 cell phone towers that were ruined. How many other communication towers of first responders and amateur radio was also, I don't have the count for that, but you know it's going to be very, very severe. These are the kind of things you want to be ready for. Remember, one of the member requirements is to activate yourself with your own equipment. So if I was outside of the fire circle, I could start doing something really fast to start helping them, even though the normal ways of communication weren't available. That's part of what EDM is about. This is why we talk about it. It's because of when those low potential, high impact scenarios occur, you want to be ready and planned for it. So please do so. Now, if you have questions about it, please contact us. I thank you for being with us. I'm glad that you've learned from it. I hope you want to learn more. And you can contact us a few ways. One, on WinLink, send a message to EDM, and there will be responses back from the steering committee. You can come directly to me on WinLink, W4RJG, or ignore the mistype there. See, I told you, it's live, kind of. Things aren't going to be perfect. You can email me direct at W4RJG at ARRL.net. There is no gmail.com with that. But W4RJG at ARRL.net. And one of those 3 ways, we'll get back to you, see how we can help you, Zoom presentation, whatever. You can also go to YouTube and look for MCOM Direct Messaging. See there at the bottom, that little blue box? Or go back to the beginning of the video and it's larger where you can see it. MCOM Direct Messaging, and we have our training videos there, and I've mentioned a few. And as I said, we're also going to be putting out a few more. Now, there's not going to be any Q&A directly here because we're really not live, but please contact us with your questions and we'll do the answer part for you. Thanks a lot for being here, 73, and have yourself a great day.